Oh, come on. There we go. Okay, everybody see the opening slide there?
Yep, looks good. CPAC.
Yep. Okay, this is a program I did up at CPAC a little while back. A few little touch-up things here that I did on, but I thought I'd talk a little bit about the little pistol, and we'll kind of explain as we go through this program. We'll explain what the little pistol is and what it means to all of us mortal people who don't have deep pocketbooks for it. So listening and finding out about DXing. So this is not rocket science. This is all pretty simple stuff here. But before we get going, I need to first do a little pep talk about what I'm going to be talking about. So it doesn't take skill, or excuse me, it does. It does take some skill and some basic equipment to work DX. You're just talking a lot about DX, and this little program is kind of a rah-rah that causes you to think about some aspects about DX and how you might go after other DX out there. But I know that you can do it. And even basic equipment can get an awful lot done. It's kind of surprising. If you don't have the skills now, you can always learn them. Your current HF stations, whatever it is probably good enough to get you started. So let's go. So this is not a life or death training exercise. If you ain't having fun, then you're not doing it, and then you're doing it wrong. You're DXing. You gotta be out there having fun. Now I have to say that I get pretty wound up when I'm out there DXing, and if people aren't, or if things aren't going my way, I get pretty frustrated. But that's just the way I am. I get very involved with what I'm doing. There are lots of different aspects of ham radio. I spent the first 5 years of this as I was licensed, just involved in yakking around. I didn't do any DXing. It wasn't in the cards, but I had a lot of fun with all the other aspects of ham radio and playing with all the different aspects of it. So the only DX that I found was usually stuff that I stumbled into. It wasn't that I was out there looking for it. So I stumbled into probably about 20 to 30 different countries in my first 5 years. That's not a whole lot, but I wasn't out there actively looking for it. Then some guys invited me down to Grenada for the CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest. So we went down there, and that's when my eyes got open about DXing and working with people that had done serious DXing, serious DXers, understanding what to look for, and being in such a rich place for DX as far as being down there close to the equator. So then I caught the bug and I found the light out there. Any station can work DX. I mean, we had okay stations down there in Grenada, but that just happened to be location. That made a huge difference. So you may be a big gun, and I'll explain what a big gun is, or you may be a little pistol, now a guy with just 100 watts out there, or you could even be doing it with something less. A lot of those guys, or there's guys out there that have done DXCC that run QRP in a matter of 2 years. So that's very surprising. QRP is 5 watts or less. So here's a big gun. You can always hear them coming. They're the guys running the 300 megawatt transmitters that you can hear anywhere in the world. And they have towers that are 200 foot tall with 3 or 4 beams that are stacked on top of that tower. Here's another example of a big gun. This is a tower that 160 meter beam with 80 meter beam on top of it. This is down in, I think it was Norway. and it no longer exists. It actually came crumbling down to earth. It got hung up with a whole lot of icing because they live in a very cold place, and the tower could not support the weight of all the ice that was packed on it. So it came crashing to earth. So you can tell the guy that kind of sponsored this, he basically was the CEO of Nokia.
Huh.
So let's talk about a little pistol here. And mind you, this is not a radio at all. So a little pistol is kind of a guy that's just like, here's an ICOM 7000. It's a nice little mid-range 100-watt radio, but it's in today's standard, it's not something that's cream of the crop. It's a good radio, but not great. But again, you're just running 100 watts on this guy. Yeah, maybe all you have is a simple dipole, chunk of wire, stuck up on a pole hanging over your roof. May be able to support a compact Yagi up there. That works really good on the upper beams, 10, 15, and 20. So I started working into Europe, Asia, and some semi-rare places. DX was no longer a fluke. I had some idea about how to look for it, how to handle it, and how to go after it and be aggressive at looking at that. So Europe is a real easy place for us here in the Pacific Northwest. We just point our antennas to the north to or northwest, and there we can start working. I mean, there's a bazillion countries, tons of hams in there. A lot of those guys have some really premium equipment, and it's very, very easy to work all the people there in Europe. So just for a disclosure, or full disclosure, the holy grail out there is trying to get your DXCC. So there are 340 entities. Now these can be countries, these can be rocks out in the middle of the ocean, they can be sandbars. There's all kinds of different forms of entities, but they're not all just nations. So all you need is the first 100 on any band, any mode, to end up, and you have to have it verified. You have to have it confirmed. Then you can get your first round of DXCC. Then the certificate up in the upper right kind of gives you a picture of showing what the, as you progress with getting more and more countries, you can get these little stamps, and you can keep adding those things onto that certificate. So the first 100 is pretty easy. Second 100 starts getting a little on the tougher side. Getting that third 100 to get to 300, that is a lot of work. You've got to really watch who's doing the expeditions, where they are, the time of the year, and you have to work at that last 200 plus to get to 300. And then the last 30 or 31 of them, that's the tough ones. So the Holy Grail is the honor roll and getting to 331 entities. And ham radio operators spend their life working on this. It is a lifelong quest. So someone that's kind of older, that's getting into the hobby, it's going to be pretty tough to be able to get to that 331. And also you have to have the propagation that's in the right place, and you have to have expeditions. A lot of times some expeditions don't get around to places, but maybe once every 5 years or more than that. The good thing that I mentioned is that right now there are a bunch of expeditions for Antarctica, for Africa, all over the South Pacific. There are lots of expeditions that are in the planning stages. So this coming 2 years, that's how far this stuff is kind of extending. You will see a lot of expeditions and a lot of push for people to continue to take and add to their DXCC. So what changed from prior years? Because I started listening for DX. I learned how to listen for DX and how to go after it. Before that, I only bumped into it by accident. My DXing became much better because I knew what to listen for. I knew what sites to go through to find out what expeditions are going on. I knew what kind of chat lines to get tap into to listen to see how things are going. Many of these major expeditions have their own websites, so you can get on them, those websites, and you can see where things are being logged to get some idea of when you would have the best chance of contacting some of these rare DX places. So let's dispel a few DX myths. I can't work DX because I don't have an amplifier. Rubbish. Guys that run QRP, 5 watts or less, they can get their DXCC in a couple of years. It's going to be tougher to work some of these other ones, but they can do it, even at 100 watts. There's a lot of guys that can very easily, like this last contest, the CQ Worldwide contest, 100 watts. That'll get you into the bank to let you take and work an awful lot of DX out there, even at 100 watts. So yes, you can. Yes, you can. Many QRP 5 watters DX operations after 5 years have greater than 200 confirmed countries. 5 years, 200 confirmed countries. That's really cool on 5 watts. Think about that. So can't work DX because I don't have a big tower and a big beam. Many successful country hunters use simple verticals or wire antennas. You don't have to have that big, nice beam. It does definitely help you, but it doesn't solve all the things that you're looking for. Even on 40 meters, just wire antenna. I've worked a ton of DX. Matter of fact, 2 years ago, during the winter, on 160 meters and 80 meters, I worked basically the whole west coast of Africa at nighttime. Now, consequently, I had to stay up. That was only happening between about 11:30 and 2 o'clock at night or in the morning. But I basically worked all of that at all the west coast of Africa on just a piece of wire up in the air. Pretty cool. I can't work DX because I live right next to against the mountain. So, you know, you can talk about living in town, you can talk about being up against the mountain, but yeah, that may cause some problems. But if you keep working at it, you always got long path. I am also kind of surprised this time of the year, before bands actually get open, I start playing around with long path. And I'm able to take and work backwards across the globe and work a fair amount of long path out there. It's weird. I mean, you'd have to scratch your head because it doesn't apply the right kind of logic, but dang it, I can get it on long path. Again, many successful country hunters live in the shadows of large mountains. So if you can't get them short path, you always got long path to get. The one killer that I keep running into is guys that live in town in a highly populated area. The bass noise, the background noise has gotten so bad in many cities where you have a constant, S9 noise level, and that can really end up hurting you trying to do DXing. But there's also other ways of working around that too. So I'm just a regular guy. If I can't do it, if I can do it, you can do it. You can also do it. Oops. No more excuses. I'm not going to tell you that these factors, power antennas and antennas, towers, and locations don't matter, because they do. They will not, however, keep you from working a lot of DXs. They'll maybe be a little bit of a problem getting some of that stuff, but you can still work a ton of DXs. So let's get on with the key workings of DXing. So a humble student approached the Zen master, bowing and slowly gaining the courage to ask him this vital question. Master, what is the secret of working DX? The master simply smiled and simply replied, listen, always listen, grasshopper. Have you heard this one before? So This is kind of a key thing to me. I didn't realize it, but well, let me go through this and I'll give you the punchline afterwards. So listen, why? Listen what? DXers are hunters. Great hunters know what they are hunting, what it looks like, what it sounds like, and where it is likely to be found. We are looking for the big game. In our case, we find it by hearing it. So I keep finding that when I get into these DX contests, I get very competitive. I am always, when I see something spotted or see something that's going on out there and I want a piece of the action, I get pretty aggressive when I'm trying to work pileups to try and close the deal and get noticed so I can pick up the exchange and move on to something else. So I feel like I'm one of those big game hunters in that I got the ego and got the aggressiveness to go after those really priceless gems out there. So why do we listen? We're trying to find that rare weak one far away. And those other entities that you're trying to get out there, they're not always the big, strong stations. Many times it's stuff that is just barely above the noise level, but it's just good enough to make the QSO to close the deal. There has been so many times where I've been tuning across the band, bumped into what looked like just a little bump of noise, backed up, took a quick listen to it, and it was some guy calling DX. And I have found more rare DX just by spotting someone like this or finding someone out there and making the contact. Now, for good or bad, once I log a contact like that, it goes out as a spot. So within 15 seconds of me closing the deal, you have 50 people on there trying to get the darn guy at the same time. So it really helps to be the first guy out there. So I don't need to do that. I just used a DX cluster. So guys, very common. You just used a DX cluster. That might work out fine if you are the T-Rex, on 20 meters. You can smash through the pile up and destroy your competition. So, it just so happens that here, good old W7 HPW, this is his transmitter that he uses here for doing things. So I don't think anybody can take it and not hear him. So it's going to be pretty hard to get through when you have competition out there that has huge antennas, huge amplifiers. That's why it is always nice to be the first guy to find them before things get posted on the DX cluster. Once things get posted on a DX cluster, it's going to be a real problem to try and break through it, and I'll explain why. If you find a real gem before anyone else does, then you can easily pick it up. So that's what I mean. If you're tuning along, find a guy first time, you can close the deal right then and there. You won't have to have any competition, or there won't be any competition out there to stop you. If you wait and use the cluster to go after these guys, what are you going to find when you tune over to that frequency? You're going to find a pile of guys fighting for that little tiny diamond that's at the very bottom of the pile. And what is your ability for a little pistol to try and get through that? It's going to be really, really tough. So I'll mention that. So don't forget that you may be the only one hearing the DX station. Propagation can be very selective and may last for only a few minutes. There's been so many times where I've tuned across, found a guy, closed the deal. By the time he got put onto the DX cluster, that guy disappeared because the propagation changed. So it's just, you have to be there at the right minute, right moment, at the right time. 10 meters and on the CQ Worldwide contest this last couple of weeks, same way. 10 meters was in and out. I mean, it was really hard to close a a conversation because things just didn't work stable long enough to do that. So keep listening. Might be surprised what you find. You just never know as you're tuning around there. It's totally random as far as what you find and what you're going to get out there. Well, look what I found. He was the only signal on the band, and I was calling CQ and was calling CQ. So here's a guy. In fact, this was the guy that out of Zimbabwe. I also had one of those guys out of the South Pacific on a little dinky island down there. Same way. So that is why we listen. We have to listen to find that rare DX out there. If we're a big gun, that's one thing, but if we're a little pistol, the way that we do our work and be successful is we have to get out there and listen. So one key thing I'll pass along with you, everything sounds and works better with headphones. They will allow you to concentrate better. They will block out noise. They will keep the rest of the house from being being a bother to you, especially when you're doing things late at night. Trust me on that. Don't forget the boom mic and the foot switch. Those are really important things when you're doing serious DXing out there. You won't have to compete with these things that, while you're talking and trying to do things. You won't have your problem with listening to your washer and dryer rumbling in the background out there. So you really need something like this, a good set of headphones, and you can either use a boom mic affixed to your table or a boom mic that's affixed to your headset. So how to listen. Start at one edge of the band and slowly tune your VFO up and down the band, listening to each station for a few seconds. Pay special attention to those DX portions of the bands. That's the portion that is usually at the bottom of each subband or the CW band. So that's where you usually find that rare DX that's coming through there. And that's usually when the contest is not going on. So you can skip over any mundane stuff like rag chewers. If you hear a rag chewer, zing on by them. Also, when you're tuning across the band, if you're fortunate enough to have a newer radio that has a band scope on it, has a waterfall, that really helps you to take and look to see where the RF is and to quickly move to that location to try and spot any DX stations. Pay special attention to weak signals. I mean, that's really important. You find some of the best stuff out there when you can find weak signals, because a lot of times those are guys that haven't been noticed and they haven't made it into a DX cluster. Pick out call signs. One thing is that I used to be really pretty decent at it, and that's kind of faded because of my age a little bit, but that prefix on call signs really helps you to figure out where in the world they are. Like Russians are easy to pick out. The Japanese are easy to pick out. You know how to pick out Canadians, you know how to pick out Australians and New Zealand people. Also South Africa is pretty easy to pick out. But, and then you learn slowly as far as through Europe, how to pick out the different European countries. But there's a whole lot of stuff out there that's kind of rare that is really tough to remember all those darn prefixes. So I have little charts on my wall here that helps me with navigating those prefixes. Especially Caribbean gets really complicated too. Pay special attention to funny sounds and signals. By funny, I mean by flutter sounds caused by auroras that is always present at the poles. It is called the Arctic flutter. So that's usually signals that are coming up and over the North Pole. We don't have this so much as far as stuff going over under the South Pole. The guys down in South America have it and South Africa has it. but we don't get exposed to it that much. But if we hear the flutter to it, that's usually a good indication that it's something coming from Russia or from Europe. Or with an echo. Yeah, echo is another one. That usually means that it's multiple path. We like to think that our, the path of where that station is in, let's say, Europe, and that path is a straight line path to the US. A lot of times it's not. It actually makes left turns, right turns, veers left and right, and it's not always a straight path. And there can be times where that path actually splits, and thereby when it gets to us, we'll end up hearing some kind of a little multi-path that comes through it. It's usually a little faint, it's not real strong, but when you hear that, that's usually a good indication that that signal's coming from a long distance. Like this last CQ worldwide, a lot of those countries down there in the Arabian Peninsula, they had two really good openings that came through from down there. And those guys, because of the path that the RF took coming out of that area, had a nice little flutter or a nice little echo to them. So when you heard those guys, it was cool to try and pick those things out and try and close the deal with them. Or if you're doing CW, it may have a weird chirp to it. That's another good one that I'll tell you that it's maybe from a rare long or from a place long ways away. Phone operators speaking in foreign languages. It's always interesting. I am absolutely blown away at some of the contacts that I make on phone and how well the English language is being spoken around the world. Some of it is pretty tough, but there are some people that have incredibly good English speaking skills, and it's hard to even pick up an accent. But if you can hear an accent, that usually gives you a clue that, hey, someone you want to chase down. Or stations ripping off QSOs as fast as they can. So these are, this is a tent down there on Peter I Island down in the Antarctica, 2006. And so if you hear someone's ripping off a bunch of stations as fast as they can possibly go, that's usually a de-expedition down there. Of course, when you tune upon a huge pileup, you know that something is interesting happening. So it's like, well, let's find out what's going on there. Pretty much anyone, pretty much anytime, just remember the low bands are better in the dark, and the higher bands are usually better in daylight. So that means 20 meters is better in the light, 40 and 80 meters is and 160 is better at nighttime. Note the line between daylight and darkness on the map. So you can see it kind of crossing the upper edge of Canada and the lower edge of South America. So if you're astronomy type of person, you know that as the terminator. For ham, we call that the gray line. Enhanced propagation occurs along that gray line. So I can't tell you how much rare stuff I have picked off from gray lining. Gray lining, get up early in the morning so you can work DX while the gray line is passing over us. Right now, gray lining is about 5:30 around here. So 5 to 6, you never know what you're going to end up picking up. But remember, it's going to be short-lived. So whatever's going on, you got to close that QSO really quick, because that is not going to work very well. It's also helped me out on several times on 15 meters for worked all states. I had a terrible time getting Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho. and gray lining helped me to take and pick those guys off and close the deal on worked all states. So so again, you got to listen. You got to tune around and be active and see what's going on during the gray line. So another point is the world doesn't look like this. It's not flat. So if you're trying to take and point your beam somewhere, you really, really need to have something like, I can't remember the name of the azimuth, a map here. You can actually go online and you can print one of these things out, but you have to remember that, you know, where you point your antenna is not always where you expect the things are going to end up going. So you have to realize how that works. So I found some DX. Now what? Great. But hold your horses for a minute before you just dive in. Listen to the DX stations for a few seconds. He may be giving you instructions, like he may be saying, I only want EU. So that means he's only working stations out of the EU. So you need to end up waiting until he stops working that. Maybe working up 5, he's working split. Might think about this, but how do you know how to end up putting your radio in split mode? Or if he's working, I only want W5s or W, you know, for our section there. So that means he's only going to want to listen to that. I'll listen to stations that start with W5. The DX station should always be in charge of the pilot. That's what you expect out of a kind of the net control, the guys out there calling CQ. Listen to how he wants to handle your station. Listen some more. Try to figure out the operator's pattern. Figure out how much more efficient if you time it well and call where the DX is actually listening. He can't hear you calling. Well, excuse me. He can't hear you calling while he is transmitting. So I just see so many times where you have Spanish and Italian operators, they're out there just calling constantly their call sign, even when the operator is calling, transmitting at the same time, and it's worthless. It's absolutely worthless. That's why split is particularly attractive. So if he is working simplex, then you are ready to jump in. However, if he is working split, you need to figure out where he is listening. He'll normally tell you that he is listening like up 5 or down 5. If sometimes, and that means 5 KC, a lot of times he'll say, I'm working up 5 to up 10. So he's working in an area. So that allows more operators that are responding back to him to spread out and try and contact them. Now, another thing is that I keep forgetting how to set my radio to do split. And I can't remember how many times I've always said, crud, he's working split. And I have to get out my manual and figure out how to set my rig up to do split. So it's a good idea to practice a few times once a year to how to get your rig into and out of running split, because it's a really important concept. Okay, a couple of simple receiver tricks to teach you what will improve your listening ability. For maximum sensitivity, turn your RF gain down. It'll help reduce the static. It'll help reduce the AGC operation, and it will give you a little less sensitivity, but it will actually give you a little bit better ability to pick out those stations there and to know what's going on. So that'll help a little bit on ear fatigue. I know in a long pond test, at the end of it, I get a lot of ear fatigue and I get tired of listening to the static, and that'll help reduce some of it. If you like noise blankers has, you have to watch them. Some noise blankers are really good, some of them are really bad, some of them are just mediocre. But a lot of times if you use a noise blanker, it can make all the information out there kind of sound like garbage. It makes it all mushy, like mashed potatoes. So we're almost there. Have a few more golden nuggets to throw out there. So a second most valuable secret of DXing. It has been said that you can't work them if you can't hear them. True. I found that to be true too. You can't work them if you're not there. So if you're not on the air listening to what's going on, you're never going to hear them. And for me, even when I'm shoveling email and stuff like that, a lot of times I have the radio on and I just tune off and listening to some QSOs or listening to what's going on, and I'll maybe tune across something that's kind of important. So I have my radio on an awful lot of the day out there. Another thing, the sun looks like this. Looks like just a great big orange fruit out there. It's probably not good. So if you saw sun that kind of looked like an orange out there, no blemishes on it, you're probably not going to get any propagation out of there. But scientists don't always understand everything that goes on with the ionosphere. Even if it looks bad and you have bad numbers, you can always be surprised. Jump in, call CQ, find out what's going on. If you, like with FT8, you can get out there and call CQ and you can see where in the world that your RF is going. There's lots of tools out there to give you an idea about how good or bad the propagation is. So, let's see, that in the green there. So if you get numbers like sunspot numbers down 39, solar flux index, up at 109, that's actually really good. K index of 5 and 1, that's not bad. I mean, it's not great, but that's probably worth getting out there and trying it. So at times we're all feel like this with a 100-watt transmitter and a vertical and the hordes of Asians. They're standing between me and BS7H. I want that QSL. So BS7H is Scarborough Reef, and trying to get through to them with hordes of Asians, especially the JAs, it's going to be really tough. What about that? So you just have to end up persisting and figuring out timing. Sometimes when you're, the guy calls QRZ to see if anybody wants to try and talk to him. Everybody's going to yell out their call sign all at the same time. Sometimes if you kind of delay it a little bit, so you're a little bit late on it, the guy listening to you is going to pick up the very end of your call sign. So one of the advantages the guys have that are QRP is that they'll put out their call sign and follow it with QRP. Generally, the guy controlling what's going on, if he hears that QRP, he gives that QRP station priority over anybody else. So that's a little testament on if you just delay your response or delay your call sign out there, sometimes that'll give you an advantage on getting through the big guns out there. So DXing war stories. So a ham in a dogfight on 15 meters, trying to work a new one in Africa. He is trying to tend a baby at the same time on calling, trying to put out his call sign to make the context. You can't pick the time when DX is available. When DX is available, you got to be there to take and answer it. When a baby needs to be fed, you got to be there to feed the baby. So if those two things happen in the same time, you got to figure out how to work things. So with the baby in the guy's lap, him calling and calling, and he was not getting through, but his son did. Whoa. So he was yelling and screaming in the background while the guy was trying to throw his call sign out there. Suddenly the DX operator says, "I hear a baby." Embarrassing, but he got through. I bet you hadn't thought about using that as a way of getting through those pileups. So this presentation was basically pulled from a small booklet called The Little Pistol Guide to HF Propagation. I think you can still find that out on the web somewhere if you wanted to look at it. And it's a neat little book of just some good practical ideas to do your DXing out there. So any questions or comments on this guy? At least it gives you some idea of things that you might be able to do for DXing, but it requires, you got to have time in the seat. You got to be out there listening. You got to know what to listen for. You need to spend a little bit of time to see what expeditions are coming up. You need to put those things in your calendar. You need to have some organization around it if you're going to end up trying to be a serious DXer and go after those rare stations.
Hey, Mike, real quick. Just out of curiosity, are you on a quest to try to get as many countries as you can, or are you on a different particular focus on a particular band, or what is your personal preference?
Well, okay, right now my preference is I'm trying to finish up my work all states. The only band that I don't have right now is 10 meters, and that's pretty obvious why I don't have that. I have a ton of international contacts on 10 meters. I just don't have hardly any US stations on 10 meters.
Okay.
So I have basically worked all states from 160 meters through all the warp bands all the way down through 12 meters, but I'm missing, I think, three stations or three states on 10 meters. The next thing I'm working on is a DXCC, just 100. Is all I'm really looking for. If you can add to it, fine, but that comes along with better propagation. And right now it's just so. But this on the CQ Worldwide contest, that got me 50 meters of DXCC. I already have 20. I have 40. I don't have 80. 80, I'm missing probably maybe 10, a count of 10 there. And 160, I'm probably missing about 15 to about 18, I think it is. So right now I'm trying to work my way through on DXCC until 15 meters opens up and I can finish up WAS, and then I'll go back to continue to take and work on DXCC stuff. Then once I get finished with that, that's DXCC, and all those different bands will be mixed mode. Then I'll go back, and as propagation continues to improve, then I'll try and do DXCC on just phone, and then just digital, and work it that way. And as you work through that, then you're always going to be running into other DXCC entities out there, and that'll keep piling on to my existing total number for all the different bands. So that's what I'm kind of going after right now. But I'm also getting really actually starting I think sometime in December, then we start getting into more of the expeditions. There's more of these expeditions that are going to be going out there doing stuff. So I need to finish up, go back through my calendar and get that stuff kind of put together. Now along that, and then I'll be doing another program on awards. And then we'll take a look at what we have in the US for different kinds of awards. And then take a look at some of the international awards out there that people really subscribe to. And I don't know if you do much looking around on qrz.com at different hams out there. More of the international hams have these little stickers that they add to their QRZ page that shows where all the different accreditations they have for the different awards that they have. And so that's become a big deal as far as kind of like hash bars on the side of your, if you're in the military, for different things that you've done.
Well, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, Mike,
Yo,
I found kind of followed a lot of FT8 and WSJTX and oh golly, JT Alert, because my primary interest in this hobby has been electronic and software experimentation, and I'm only episodically on the air. But with FT8, I can combine those as long as I care for where my soldering iron is when I go to pick it up. And so, the JT Alert tells me what countries, when they pop up, and I need that for my country count, that I can go after that. And, it's just kind of nice. And I don't have to worry about being, a little bit of, concentrating on that, just making contacts. I just sort of let the contacts come in, and it's slow that way, but I've got 70 countries in a fairly short time, and I haven't burned myself by grabbing the wrong end of the soldering iron yet.
you bring up an excellent point there, and I completely concur with that, is that I don't have a huge amount of time that I can just plant my buns in front of my radio there and run the thing. And I use JT Alert. It is an incredible tool for fine tuning, going after both states and countries. And I just leave that going on in the background if I'm over the bench soldering, or if I'm working on developing some software, or if I'm writing email. That stuff just runs in the background, and it taps me on the shoulder and says, hey, there's something to go after. So it's a phenomenal tool. I love it. Any other comments?
So the one that looked out for me running the OSU station during the Nevasas Island expedition was paying attention to their schedule, which they published online. And they said that they were going to be moving to 15 meter or turning on at 15 meters on at a certain time. And so I just went down to 15 meters half an hour before then and started getting everything tuned up and everything. And sure enough, the operator came on to do their tune up and their test a few minutes early. And I happened to be there already waiting for him, and actually had a nice, couple minute rag chew with the guy. And by the time he was ready to actually start calling CQ and actually getting in the swing of things, somebody had already spotted my conversation with him. And so by the time I moved off frequency, I got to talk to Nevasas Island for 2 minutes. The next people up had 10 seconds at a time at best.
I've had that happen too, but paying attention to that schedule there, and you need to look at the active schedule, because a lot of times they'll post times, and it can be a generalization, and you have to end up, and sometimes things will change because of bang conditions down there. You have to make real-time calls when you're on an expedition on what bang conditions are, and how equipment is working, and how operators are doing.
I recall doing something like that, having a multi-minute conversation with a particular Grenada station, by the way, from an HP trailer. Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Mike. And that was a high point in my ham career. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Any other questions? Good, you guys. Hope to see you on the bands out there. There's things are, I mean, every day, I mean, all the way down to 15 meters. 15 meters have been very busy. And you can also pull stuff out of 12 meters out there. It's been doing 12 has been doing quite well.
Mike, before you go, I got one question, quick.
Go.
Does it count if you contact the DX station during a contest to add that to your list?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. So that's why, you know, like the DXCC, or excuse me, that's why like the CQ Worldwide and WPX, those contests are so valuable as far as adding countries to your DXCC, because everything you work in that contest is scoreable.
So one disclaimer there, just to be clear, is you have to be working it as your own call sign during the contest, right, Mike?
Yeah.
It has to be, and that's like for me, I mean, you know, like for all the stuff we did down at Grenada, that was on a different call sign and it wasn't home. There's a distance parameter the ARL gives you as far as how far you're away from home. But you have to be using your own call sign and you have to be at home, basically. But what I was getting to is that for like Grenada, the stuff we've done on 7QP, the stuff we've done on field day, none of those contexts I can use. Anything else?
Thanks. Thank you again.
Back to you, you Anthony.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Yeah, good
Thanks again,
talk.
Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks everybody for coming out. Next meeting will be on, if I get the right calendar thing here to move, will be on December 20th, which is the Monday before Christmas. So bring your best holiday sweaters for the for Zoom, and we'll see everybody here in a month.
And if you don't have a costume, bring a background, right?
There you go. There you go.
And happy birthday, Anthony.
Thank you.
Oh, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, huh?
Birthday. Oh, okay.
Happy birthday.
Thank you all. All right. Without anything else, we'll go ahead and wrap it up, and I will start the process of encoding the video to upload.
Thanks.
All right.